Good morning. We got Bruce Lawrence from Sand Springs Baptist Church. We got Matt Parker from the Crucibles Fire. We had some really good feedback last week, and they said we started too quickly. So we're going to let everybody have a chance to get online and get lined up with the Facebook Live. Bruce, are you going to do a watch party?
I'm going to try, but first I thought we would do a little rapping. You ready to rap?
Let's do it. I've got a Lecrae song that I know.
Oh, yeah. Well, I would almost pay money to see that, but
we can do it. I'm waiting to see it show up on live. I'm not seeing it show up just yet.
Okay.
Are you seeing it show up on yours?
No, sir, not yet.
Come on, Facebook. Help us out here.
Work with me.
Work with me. Ah, we're up.
All right.
We are live.
Live from the Lone Star State. Oh, hey, check that out. Oh, that's not it.
We have exactly 0 viewers.
Nice. I like it.
Yeah, that audience is growing. Facebook Live.
Oh, hey, check it out.
Are you going to do a watch party?
I'm going to have to turn the volume down on that.
Yeah, I had to do mine too. Hey, you showed up as my only viewer.
Oh, how about that? Now let's see. How do I do? I want to show that. I want to do this. I want to do that. Huh. All right.
Did you get it going?
Not yet. Okay. Oh, look, we got our tags up and everything.
Man, we're up.
Okay.
All right. Why don't you introduce us today?
Okay. Hey there. I'm Bruce Lawrence from Sand Springs Baptist. This is Matt Parker from The Bridge and Crucibles Fire. And we are just both kind of fired up about a particular subject in the area. And there's really nobody I know of that knows more about the subject. And whenever you call me and ask about it, usually I call this guy and say, hey, man, help me out. What do I need to do here? So, Matt, can you talk to us today? Let's talk about fostering adoption and the support thereof.
Okay. Let me do a couple of things here. The biggest thing for me that I guess I wanted to communicate today was that anyone and everyone can help with foster care. I can't tell you how many times that someone finds out we're foster parents or that we've adopted, and we hear things like, I couldn't do that, or boy, it takes a special person to be called to do that, or whatever. And I always have mixed feelings about how to respond to that. We were talking just in our kind of getting ready to come on the air about sometimes you just want to say things to people that are just truth things, but they come across as harsh, and so you don't want to do that.
Right.
But my verse on it, and I'll just read it, is James 1:27. It says, religion that is pure and undefiled before God and the Father is this, to visit the orphans and widows in their affliction and to keep oneself unstained from the world. And so in James, he's telling us that, I mean, religion in its purest form, we see this over in Psalms 2 as well. We talked about this before, is to visit orphans in their distress. And that is foster care. And so it's one of those things that the entire church has been called to do. And so, but a lot of times people think, I can't do that. My home is not big enough, or my family's already too big because there are limitations, or there are other medical reasons or whatever. And that's not to say, well, you're not doing God's will. Because there may be very legitimate reasons. But I wanted to share some things today that everybody can be involved. I got a graphic I'm going to put up here real fast.
Absolutely.
Helping and what it looks like. And the thing about foster care is there's two things in foster care, I guess, that I would want to help people. There's fostering, and then there's fostering to adopt. It's really two sides of the house. On the foster side, that's short term, typically a year or less. The child, the family's had some trouble, they need some stability, and then their family's working to go back to the child going home. And they're not looking for permanency, as it were. And that's a real need. I mean, there's over 30,000 children in the foster care system as of last August in the state of Texas.
Now that would be like the folks that we're working with, like at House of Hope, Grace House, folks like that, as they're going through their recovery process and getting back into life.
Yes,
those are those children, right?
That's right, and that's situations where parental rights have not been terminated, and the families are working what they call working services, and they're going to parenting classes, they're going to some counseling, and they're doing the things that they need to do to correct whatever was, the problem, whether it was abuse or neglect or whatever. The other side of the house is what we call the foster to adopt, and the child, once the parental rights have been terminated by the courts, the child then comes up for adoption. They are now legally available to be adopted. And last year in the state of Texas, there were over 7,000 children in the foster care system ready to be adopted. And there were only 1,500 adoptive homes. And so you do the quick math on that, and there's an extreme deficit at the top tier of, we need families that are willing to not only house a child who is in transition, but to actually open up and say, I want this child to be a part of my life forever. And we've adopted 3 children out of the foster care system. And once you do that, I mean, they're your children. They're as much your children as your biological children. And so I guess to me, those two things are equivalent to me at the top level. Ultimately, we need these children to have permanent homes. But there are those that maybe because of their station in life or their age, they're not really good candidates for a permanent home, but they're great candidates for those transitionary times. And so I encourage people, if your heart's really in the front line of this ministry on that front, contact me, Bruce, or the agencies, CPS or some of the adoption agencies, and get involved there. The third thing is to sponsor, and that was kind of an interesting one. What does it mean to sponsor?
Right.
Some of the stuff that you can do, I'm going to look at something I wrote down earlier, and I'm going to put sponsor and donate together. There are tons of organizations. A lot of the adoption agencies are 501c3, nonprofit type things. They run on donations. Yes, they are part of the funding scheme from the state, but they usually have minimal staff. They have a lot of volunteers and that sort of thing. So if you say, I want to be involved in this, but I can't adopt, I'm really not able to foster for whatever reason, you can also always volunteer. There's CASA, the court-appointed special advocate, I think is what it's called, where you're just a person. It's not a full-time position. There's no pay. You just say, I've got a couple of days a month that I can go see children, and you actually become their advocate and, for the child, their voice. You can volunteer at organizations for events. You can donate money. And there's another thing that I try to tell people that people don't think about is, and I get this question, so do foster parents get reimbursed for their expenses? The answer is yes, they do. But there's also, if you adopt a child or they're in that part of the system, that reimbursement is far less. And that money actually drops off quite a bit, but the expenses don't. And if you've got a foster family that's got, multiple placements, The
Right.
expense is pretty high because you're having to run everybody to the doctors all the time, and there are requirements. I mean, within 30 days, they've got to have a certain number of visits, so you're taking time off work, and those sorts of things. There's a ton of expenses, and sometimes the children come to you with literally nothing. Maybe 2 or 3 changes of clothes, and that's it. And so you either have to find a place like what we call Carly's Closet or the Rainbow Room or different places that have clothes, and they're usually you can't get a lot, so you still have to go to the store and buy. I know our last placement, he literally came with like a pair of pants and 2 pair of underwear,
Right.
and we had to go to Walmart and buy some blue jeans and some shirts and socks and things for school the next day, and those sorts of things can mount up. And so if you could go through your local church, go through an organization or something like that, or if you know someone personally and can want to help them out, there's always that. And that to me is like sponsoring. You can say, I want to adopt this family, and help them out.
One of the things that I'd like to say there is sometimes we have to be creative also, right? I get people who are going through situations like this. They'll ask if we can help them pay some bills and stuff. I may not be able to help you pay bills immediately, but you know what? I've got 4 freezers of food. I can offset food cost and get you down the road, and you can just take that money to spend on blue jeans and stuff, right? So we've got churches. We just got to be creative with how we do things.
That's exactly right. And I know for us, one of the largest expenses we have as a foster family is the grocery bill.
Right.
And for us, God has seen fit to bring boys into our home, and they eat everything that's not nailed down to the counter.
Right.
And and so there is that. You do have to get creative, and maybe you have one area that someone can help, like you said, with the free food, that would free up those funds to do some other things, even if it's a one-time or a short-time thing. My thing is, if your heart is to help,
Yep.
if your heart is to engage, start asking questions. And there are so many needs. Your caseworkers, your CPS caseworkers, your adoption agency workers, and your adoptive workers and the directors, they have literally lists. There's the what do they call it? The care portal. Are you familiar with the care portal?
No, sir.
There is a system, or it's not a system. I guess it's I don't know if it's would call it an organization, but it's through Child Protective Services. It is in conjunction with faith-based organizations like churches, and it's called the Care Portal. Each county has one, and you can sign up to get their emails and things. And what they do is they have a list of needs that come in on a daily basis. And when you sign up, you say, I or my church can help with these sorts of things, and you fill out a form and say whether it's money, housing, food, whatever, support groups or whatever. And then when something comes into their office that fits your needs set, they'll send you an email and says, we've got this need, it fits your profile, can you help?
Cool.
And so it's called the Care Portal. You can Google it. I'll tell you what, I'll make myself a note and I'll put it in the comments after we post this.
Okay.
Of how to get in touch with the Care Portal.
Cool.
And that's under the sponsoring, volunteering, donating. That all kind of goes together. Just if you're looking for some place to help, you can.
Right.
And then the last one is educate. There's a lot of blogs. There are a lot of blogs online about fostering, about adoption, and statistics and things like that. The Crucibles Fire is one. We blog a lot about that. Foster to Forever is another one. The Humans of Foster Care is another great one.
Right.
Subscribing to some of those, learning, educating yourself, and then educating others, sharing those things on your social media, using whatever influence you have to help alleviate some of the problems in the system.
Yes.
Numbers, you might not can do anything except that, but do that. And then I guess there's one on that's not on our list is prayer.
Yes.
The spiritual battle that goes on with these children and in our families is something that kind of gets washed under. We always focus on the physical needs,
right?
Things that are tangible. But I want to tell you from experience that the spiritual battle can be just as significant, if not more so, from dealing with early childhood trauma and all the effects of that. That's one of the things I love to talk about is the effects of trauma. love to talk about it is kind of a weird thing to say, but I love to educate people because it's so prevalent, and it's not just in foster care or adoptive care. I mean, children are being affected by trauma all over the place, and we're learning that the effects of that on their actual brain and functioning have a lot of ties into school problems, behavior problems, family problems, and in the foster system, it is just exponential. Yes. Because of abuse or neglect or whatever. And to educate people on what's actually happening with your children is an extremely important resource that people can help us with, and creating awareness. When you see a mom in the store with 4 or 5 children, 4 or 5 different races represented, I mean, it's a good indicator that she's probably a foster mom. And right. Especially if there's behavior problems, and instead of the scorn that we typically feel and hear, and honestly, we've experienced it.
Right.
You'd be surprised the rude things that people will say because they're not educated and they're not aware of what's happening.
Right. You mentioned CASA a few minutes ago, and I guess I got to hear a presentation by them just a year or so ago, and it was one of those things that really blew my mind whenever they initially said that the group of the CASA group in Athens and Henderson County was the 6th largest in the state, or the 6th largest need in the state.
Yeah.
When they initially said that, I thought, oh wow, that's not great. And then I really started thinking about we're talking about San Antonio, Dallas, Houston, Athens.
Yep.
Wow, how does that even happen? And it has a lot to do with the prevalence of the drug abuse and addiction in the area, right?
Right.
A lot of those kids have to live through that, and that's where we come in. We're supposed to be, it tells us in First Peter, I think it is, that we are supposed to be the warrior priest of our home, right? We're
right.
supposed to be called aside. We're supposed to be taking care of people.
Right. Well, it's a twofold problem. The one you mentioned is it's not just it shows up in the CASA need, but if you do the statistics for our region, which is Northeast Texas, we're one of the highest in the state for need in terms of foster care in some demographics, and yet many of our children have to get shipped to other regions like Houston or whatever, because we come up on the need list because we have a lot of children that are in need, but we don't have enough volunteers to cover the need that we have, either for CASA or for foster homes. And right. So you could, in some ways, you're not going to affect the raw numbers of where we fall on the sheer numbers of who we need. But the real telling statistic is how many children in the system in our region we're struggling to find CASA volunteers for them because they don't have any more.
Yes.
And so, that's a great way. And the CASA is such a great organization because they literally are the voice of the child. The child will have an attorney ad litem, which is the legal voice of the child, but the CASA worker can actually go into court and argue for the child, and they really do carry a good amount of weight with the court system in terms of what's best for the kid.
Right.
And ultimately, that's what we all want.
Right. And go back to the verse that you used in James. It's one of those things where I'm trying to say this without ruffling too many feathers, but if we are the church and we have the stance that we do against abortion, right? Mm-hmm. And we claim to be those in support of life, what are we doing about those kids who are right now in a spot to where they don't feel like they have a life? And it really troubles me as a church what we're not doing.
I agree. That's one of the things that I've been saying for years, and you're right, it ruffles feathers. But to be pro-life and not pro-abortion is one of, not pro-adoption, is one of the most incongruous things that we do. And I am 100% pro-life. When our daughter was in the womb, I will never forget, because she was so sick even then, the doctor visit where they asked my wife if she wanted to abort. And of course, I responded with, no, we don't. And they literally physically maneuvered themselves between me and my wife and said, Mr. Parker, that's not your decision.
Ooh.
And it was a watershed moment for us. And of course, we said no. And we were staunchly pro-life. But if we're going to be staunchly pro-life, we also have to be just as equally for working towards giving those babies that need a place to go. If we want them to live, we have to give them a home.
That's right.
And it's not just the babies. Those turn into toddlers, which turn into preteens and teenagers, and on down the line. And if we're not willing to get involved on the adoption side, I think our voice on the pro-life, anti-abortion side is diminished.
I'm gonna jump in right there, because I know you have some statistics about once those kids reach their teenage years, right? And then from there transitioning to an 18-year-old, and then if you could even mention sex trafficking in the sex industry and that sort of thing.
I don't have all the statistics in front of me, but I will say this: I think the number is somewhere around 30% of the children who age out. It's called aging out. When they turn 18, they literally are given a few bucks and sometimes a bus ticket, and the state's finished. That's all they. It's not all they can do, and they really tried what they call post-adoptive, or not post-adoptive, but post-services, and they have programs. But about 3% of the children that age out of foster care actually utilize those services, because there's no one there to show them, here's where the paperwork goes, make sure you do it. They're almost instantly homeless.
Right.
I think it's like 7% of them are instantly homeless. We work with and partner with at Crucibles Fire with ValiantHearts.org, is a organization run, CEO'd by Carrie Gurley, that they work in Dallas and in that area to rescue women and globally from the sex trafficking industry. And their number one demographic are children who've been in the foster care system and have aged out. The statistics shows that for a young lady, especially after aging out and going to, say, a bus station, they will be propositioned by a trafficker within the first several hours of being on their own. And the statistics are unbelievable. Not to mention, now they need welfare. Now they need free health care, and they're become burdens instead of producers. And not to mention health issues, mental health issues, and it just goes down the line, and it's really tragic and sad. The statistics, and then they exponentially, their chances of survival really go up. The yield curve is almost vertical when they have some permanency, some stake in the ground to come back to. And there's statistics, it's still hard. We have adoptive children in our own home, and it's a constant battle, but you always have somewhere to come back to.
All right. And again, back to your points, whenever you really made this broadcast just really pop when you covered my face up. Going back to that is we have a 9-year-old, and he's at an age where I don't think we're ready to introduce another child into the home, right? But we are in the supportive and educational part of the scale right now, right? And when we get to a point where he's a little more sound and where he is of a young man, we will probably pursue some of the other more engaged steps. But like you said, it's sometimes I feel like people's initial response is kind of an excuse not to get involved.
It is, and the most common one is, I don't think that I couldn't handle being so attached,
right?
And then losing them. I've written several articles, and other people have too, about that is actually the worst reason not to do it. To be honest, I'm going to look right in the camera, look everybody right in the eye. The one thing that foster children need the most is to be attached to someone somewhere for some period of time. And that's actually the best reason to do it, is because you will get attached, and it's going to hurt, and it's going to hurt terribly, but it's not nearly as bad on us as it is on them. And to give them a moment in their life where they know what it's like to be loved unconditionally, and to have that to go back to is invaluable to their literal survival.
Yep.
And so I guess I would plead with you, if that's your first response is, I just couldn't do it. I want to encourage you not to think about how it affects you.
Right.
That's a hard statement. It really is, but not to turn your feelings and thoughts in on yourself. And that's why James says what he does. That's what pure religion is it turns that thought process out onto others and onto those children. And yes, we're going to be poured out and you'll be used up and it'll be hard. But it's for a great cause, and it's a cause that was very near and dear to the heart of God.
You know, I will be 49 in January, and what you just said just was touched off a couple of points to me. Is I can remember there was an old couple across the street. You hear me talk about them all the time, Granny Reisner and Grandpa Reisner. And whenever I really look at their period of time of influence in my life, it was about 5 years.
Yeah.
Right. And then probably the next biggest influencer in my life was Coach and Miss Martin. And that was a period of about 4 or 5 years. Right. But there's not a day that goes by that I don't reference something I learned from those two couples. Right. And it's the same thing with these children. Is it may only be for a little bit. You told one of your recent blogs was just a heartbreaking story, but that child will carry that the rest of his life. I have no doubt about it.
Yeah. Well, and that's just it. We can't always see everything to its fruition. And really, if you look at the way the church even works, it's not the way it usually works. We come into something for a season and we influence it, and then it goes out. Even the learn, teach, repeat model of 2 Timothy and making disciples is we influence while we can, and we teach them to go and be independent. And this is really the same kind of a thing. There will be instances where we get to see it to its finish point, but a lot of the times, sometimes they just need a reference point when they get back maybe into their original situation, to know that, oh, now I can see why this wasn't okay.
Right.
I've seen the real thing. My analogy is always like, it's how the Federal Reserve teaches people to spot counterfeit money. For the first 6 months, all you do is count real money. You don't ever see a counterfeit. But then when they start slipping in the stuff that's fake, you spot it immediately because you're so familiar with the real thing.
Right.
And for me, it's like that in foster cares. If we can show them what it looks like to unconditionally love, be loved through good times, bad times, hard times, crying, discipline, everything, and still be loved, when they get out into the world that doesn't love them, they'll have a frame of reference and they'll know that that's not how it was intended. And that is an invaluable thing that we can do as a volunteer, a donor, a foster parent, adoptive parent, you name it, as a church member, supporting the families who are actively involved.
Right.
You know, things like helping them in church service when their kids are just unruly, or if you turn the lights down and it triggers a PTSD moment. Seeing that happen, being supportive as you can, and just buttressing them in the name of the Lord. Those kinds of things that make this work.
Yeah, and you mentioned prayer earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Well, covering them in prayer, and being willing and able to, whenever it's time for a warrior's prayer, okay, there's something going on, and just going into the prayer closet with them and just, all right, we're going in. It's invaluable to have people you can just lean on.
Well, and being aware of spiritual warfare is important. I mean, I can't tell you how many times that I've called out to some of my brothers and said, hey, we're in the battle right now. I need you to stop what you're doing. I need some cover. And they do that. And they, that was my wife. She says hi.
Hi.
And so anyway, they do that for us, and it's very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's crazy how many of the situations that these children are in is whenever we talk about them from a physical standpoint, we talk about the drug abuse and the things that are going on around them in their lives. But when it really boils down to it, it's they're embroiled in spiritual warfare.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's where we're supposed to be involved with them.
Right. Exactly. So.
Awesome, man. I love your views. I love just your knowledge base, man. The more I think that we can get that out there, and the more we can almost, I don't want to say challenge, but almost challenge Christians to realize, hey, look, if we are the church, there's some things we need to be doing. And these are, and the statistics just blow me away. I've got a talk I'm doing in the spring, and I'm going to be using some of those statistics. And it's crazy to me how folks like you and I, whenever we get the opportunity, I get the opportunity to do jail or prison ministry here or there, right? And I think about these children, and I think about the only difference in a lot of those folks who have now gone on and gotten into trouble or have become homeless or whatever is there was one or two people here and there that inserted themselves into my life and really saved me, so to speak, right?
Yeah, the same principle is with making disciples. It's a lifestyle of intentionality. It's entering into relationships for the purpose of helping someone be transformed into the image of Christ. And this is like the basic fundamental ground floor, grassroots level of making disciples.
Yes, sir.
It's doing it with your children and with the children who are the fatherless. And that's how he becomes a father to the fatherless, is through us. And so it's a basic level part of what we are to do. And I kind of got into a discussion one time with a guy who he was aggravated with me because I was asserting that every Christian is called to engagement in orphan care, is what we would refer to it as in some way. And he said, well, that's just not my calling. And I said, there are a lot of things that I could have that conversation with you and probably agree with you. The only problem I have with that is the Bible. And it just calls the entire church, every believer, to make this a priority, whether it's through the system, whether it's through one of those levels in some way, even if it's just through prayer. But our hearts are called to affect and do that if we want to enter into that space where God dwells. There are many of other things that we do, but the poor, the needy, the homeless, the fatherless, all of those things, those are the ones where God says through his word, those are non-negotiables for us. If we want to be the church, we have to do them, or I question whether or not we're actually the church. And I know that's hard. It's a hard thing to say, but it's the truth of where we are.
Yeah, you're preaching now, though. Come on, that's good stuff. No, that's you know me. That's where you hit my fire button, right? Is if it's, I don't care what the name on the door says. I don't care how fancy your building is. If we are not acting like the church because we are the church, right? If we're doing the things that we're called to do, then we're falling short, and there's no two ways about it.
Right.
And especially as I get fired up when I'm doing men's ministry, right? Because we are supposed to be the warrior priest protectors of our home, right? And it doesn't just stop at our home. That's our communities. That's our churches. That's we have we have a calling, right?
Right.
We have a calling.
Right. Good deal.
All right,
Bruce, I've got to get back to work.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you, man. We had a great time, and you were going to put some links and blogs whenever you got.
When we get this posted, I'll put some links to a couple of the articles. But I'm going to I've got some links for some organizations for CASA and that sort of thing. I'll put those in the comments if anyone needs information. I may put together a little list of organizations as well. I'll post it on our blog a little bit later. And if you need information, and by all means, if you're just needing more information about if you want to become a foster parent or an adopted foster parent, contact us at thecruciblesfire.org or at Sand Springs. Contact Bruce. We can get you in touch with the right people.
Right, absolutely. And our next conversation, just as a preview, is I want to talk about spiritual ground. Spiritual ground. All right. Yeah. All right, brother. Hey, I love you, man. You want to pray us out real quick?
Love you too. Father, we love you. Thank you for this time together with Bruce as we talk about leading out in our homes and in our community. Father, we thank you and we love you for what you do. Thank you for Jesus. Thank you for turning us into and transforming us into a more clear image of Christ. We thank you. We love you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen, brother.
See you guys later.